perspective of what we're looking at. Now, if we go north of the Dead Sea, we go up to Caesarea Philippi, and that is about 32 miles from the top of the Dead Sea. Now, it gives you a perspective or an idea of how far it is. Uh, that's where they were the last time we heard from them. The last time that a location was mentioned, they went up to Caesarea Philippi, and of course that's where then Peter made that great confession. Now then tonight, they're getting ready to have another major event that is going to happen. And so let's take a look in verse 17, verse 1, and I'll show you here what I'm talking about. And after 6 days, Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John his brother, and bringeth them up unto a high mountain apart. And there he was transfigured before them. Now, we're going to be talking about the Mount of Transfiguration. This, of course, is an event, again, that everybody knows about, regardless of their Bible knowledge, why everybody's heard about this particular event. Now, we don't know the mountain that took place on. Most people think it's up on Mount Hermon. Now, Mount Hermon, as you see up there, is the very base of it, has the snow on it, and so forth, and it goes up, and I think those are clouds that we have there in the picture at this time. But it goes up, and it's a real high mountain, and it's a big mountain. It would be kind of like the Cascade Mountains. It's snow covered the year around, so it's a large mountain. Most people think that Jesus took them up into that mountain. Now, we don't know for sure. That's as good a guess as any. Now, on the other hand, you see down there where I put Mount Tabor. Now, that is another mountain. And a lot of people say that they think that it took place down there. Now, the fact of the case is, nobody knows. I think that we can safely say it's one of the two, and the reason I'd say that, to be pretty confident, is that's the only two choices that you have in that particular vicinity that is there. I'll show you pictures of both of them, but you can see them there. Now, as everybody, you have it clear, Caesarea Philippi is north of the Sea of Galilee, and Caesarea by the sea, which they call Caesarea Maritima, is over there, and that is where Cornelius was converted. The one over there by the sea, that's where Paul was held prisoner, and so forth. The only event that we have with Caesarea Philippi is that great confession that Peter made. Yet, on the other hand, how famous is Caesarea Philippi? How many people know about Caesarea Philippi? Again, every Bible student knows about that, because that is the place where that confession took place. And as I showed you several pictures of that, it's a very impressive place. The more you see about it, then you begin to see what Jesus was doing there. Now, there is a picture of Mount Hermon. Just kind of lay it out so you can see there. It's as you're standing back, that's probably 50 miles from there, and so it's a long range of mountains there, and it's very high. There again, as you get a little closer where you can see it, so it'd be kind of like going up into the Cascades Mountains over here. Now, here's the other one, Mount Tabor. And the interesting thing about this is that Mount Tabor is in a valley. It's in the Jezreel Valley, and you can see all that flat land around it. And up here where the picture is taken, there's a cliff that goes up about, I guess, 100 yards or so, standing up on. But that mountain is out there in a plateau. It's in a valley. It just comes up and down like that, and you see what it looks like. And so it catches the eye of everybody. And it could also be called a high mountain. Now, the fact is, we don't know where it is. I just want to put these things up here so it kind of give you a perspective of okay, we've got two places it might be, and it's probably up there in Hermon. You can go ahead and turn the recorder off then, Steve. So now, let's pick up our story then in chapter 17 with this Mount of Transfiguration. A tremendously wonderful, marvelous event is getting ready to take place. And I said, now after 6 days, by the way, if you read this in the book of Mark in chapter 9, it says, and after 6 days. Then you turn over to Luke, which is also in chapter 9, and it says after 8 days, or about 8 days. I forget which one it is. So you say, well, what is the situation? There's no problem there whatsoever. It's like if you were taking off from here and going to someplace, Hawaii, to take a vacation, you're going to travel on Saturday and you're going to stay over there 6 days, and then you were going to have a day back. How many days vacation did you take? Do you count your traveling days, or do you count the days that is there? Now, the Jews did the same thing we do with time, and we've talked about that before, that sometimes they would count the first day or a part of a day. In fact, you remember with Cornelius, we know about that time schedule, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and so they had 3 hours left, and they counted that as a whole day when it says 4 days, when it's only 2 days and a little bit. This is 1 day here of the traveling, 1 day there. In other words, the period of time would have been an 8-day, but the end of those days, which would be part of days, Matthew and Luke would not count. And so this is something that if you read them, you can see it. It's not even a controversial thing where the enemies of the Bible says, hey, look, there's a contradiction there, because they understand that this is the way they counted time. Okay, now he takes with him only 3 guys. Chooses the 3, so don't ask me why he chose these 3. I don't know. Jesus had 3 men that he wanted to take up with him. Now, these 3 men have had an opportunity to be with him on various occasions, haven't they? He would take them with him, like when he healed the ruler's daughter, took them in the bedroom, and so he left the others out there and took them in there. For some reason, Jesus wanted Peter, James, and John to see some things that he did not have the others to share. Now this particular event, when he gets over with, he's going to tell them, don't you tell the others. Don't you tell anybody. Don't you tell anybody about what you saw up on this mountain until after I have died and I have raised again. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing, and I like to do this. I like to try to put things in proper living perspective, where these guys were people just like you are. Just like you are. What would you do if I chose 3 of you, and it's very obvious that I'm not choosing anybody else but just the 3 of you? I pick you out and say, come with me. And I take you out here, and I show you some awesome sight that is unbelievable, that you've never dreamed that you could possibly see. It is a shocking event in this thing. Maybe I go out here and I call a man from Mars and say, come here, and a spaceship just comes right down, hovers up there. Little men from Mars get out. They start talking to me. Hi, Lowell. I say, hi, how you doing there? So we talk a little bit. You guys are standing there with your mouth open and all of this, and goes by, and they take off. And so I turn around and I say, now, let's go back down, and don't you tell anybody about this until after I'm dead. And I won't even say after I've raised again. But what would you do between now and then, not being able to tell anybody about this? So, would you do any thinking about it? You'd really do some thinking, wouldn't you? Would you wonder why I had that power to go out and yell, hey, come on down? And how I could call him down? Would that impress you? You see? And so this ate on these people, these 3 guys. It had to. Now, I'm making that point for a little point that I'll make down at the end of class, which becomes a very big point. Yeah. They probably ask you, what are they doing up there? We took a walk. I don't know what they asked. I don't know what they told them. But they didn't tell them, you see, on this. It says that they didn't tell them. Okay, so they're going up there now. They're getting ready to see something that's going to boggle their mind, but it will be used later. So he goes up, it says, brings them up into a mountain apart, and he was transfigured before them. Now that word is metamorphosed. His form was changed. It's like a cocoon and a butterfly. They go through what's called a metamorphosis. Meta means across, change, and morphe means form. Your very being is changed. And so he was transformed before them, transfigured, and his face did shine as the sun, and his garments became white as light. So now his face was shining, just bright, and the other two writers says glistening, just like the sun, and all of his garments, everything he had on, turned again shining white, and they say in such a manner that no cleanser on earth could ever make them that white. That's what Mark and Luke tell us. So there was a big change that took place in him when he got up there. So they became white. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elijah talking with him. So Moses and Elijah came, and they're talking. Now, Peter knows this is Moses and Elijah. I know he knows it because in a minute he's going to suggest that he builds a tabernacle for Moses and Elijah. How do you suppose he might know this is Moses and Elijah? Any idea how he might have recognized them? What if Jesus had said, "Hi, Moses, how you doing?" Did they? I don't either. You stated it as a fact. Closely related. Closely related. No, he speak to them, and call them by name. And so there's a way, just the same as if a couple strangers out here, and I walk up and I hear you visiting with them, I can go away and say, "Hey, there's John and Joe out there visiting with somebody." You see, when names are called there. So they're going to be names called. Now, they stay there, and we don't know how long that it's there, but it goes ahead and it says that they were talking about, you know what they were talking about? Matthew doesn't give us the whole point here. I think I'm going to flip over in a minute and read the whole thing. They had a conversation that was going on, and they talked about the death of Jesus. That was what their conversation was about. That goes ahead and says, "And Peter answered and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, I will make thee 3 tabernacles." That word tabernacle is just another word for a tent. It's a living place. It's translated booth. It's a place. It's a place for you guys. Here it is. It's nighttime, and let me fix you three houses out here, 3 camping spots, kind of the way we would put it now. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And now I'm going to stop right there. I want to flip over to Mark. Let's flip over to Mark, because we'll learn just a little bit more in these other accounts, and we've got to kind of put them all together to get the whole picture of this tremendous event that is here. So here it is. It starts out now in verse 2. "And after 6 days, Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and bringeth them up into a high mountain apart for themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his garments became glistering, exceeding white, so as no fuller or cleanser on earth can whiten them. And there appeared unto them Elijah and Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter answered and said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make thee 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. For he knew not what to answer, for they were so afraid." Now, I want to throw that in. Here again, we come across good old Peter, don't we? We've learned something about Peter. What's the one thing you know about Peter? What's that? He's impetuous. He's going to be the first one to answer. He's got to say something. And so here it is. They were there, and this awesome sight, and it would be mind-boggling, and you can't imagine seeing somebody transformed, and the glistening in the middle of the night, the way it is, and these 2 men coming, appearing, who've been dead for hundreds of years, and talking with him. And it says, Peter said this because he didn't know what to say. Well, have you ever done this, or have you ever seen anybody They don't know what to say, so they say something dumb. And you got to break the silence. Then, since you don't know what you're talking about, whatever you say is going to be really dumb. That's what Peter did. And so the Holy Spirit brings us out. He said this because they were exceedingly fearful. They were scared to death. They were scared to death. The Greek word in here is fear with the word out or from on it. And it's kind of like, I guess, we would translate, they were scared out. They were scared out of their wits is the way we would put it. They were just scared out of themselves. They weren't just a little bit afraid, but they were really scared. So Peter had to say something, so he said, let us make you these tabernacles here, for he knew not what to say. Now hold that one, and we'll turn over to Luke, the 9th chapter. And this time, as we're reading here in Luke, we start out down here in verse... where is it? Yeah, 28. Okay, that's one. And it came to pass after 8 days. See, there it is. After these sayings, that he took with him Peter and John and James and went up into the mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the fashion of his countenance was altered, and his raiment became white and dazzling. And behold, there talked with him 2 men, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory. So they also appeared in glory. They were in glorious form, whatever it is, and spake of his decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. So now they're talking to him about his death. Again, I think it's neat that the Greek word for this is, it says they weren't talking, it doesn't say they were talking about his death, they were talking about his exodus. They were talking about his exodus that was about to be accomplished at Jerusalem. In other words, he was going to be leaving here and going there. So they're talking to him now about this. Now Peter and they that were with him were heavy with sleep, and when they were fully awake, they saw the glory and the 2 men that stood with him. And it came to pass, as they were parting from him, Peter said, to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us build you 3 tabernacles, and so forth, one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. And so Peter just had to talk, but he wasn't realizing. And I think all of us have seen that when you're scared to death. The man was absolutely terrified in what he saw. Now, let's go back to Matthew. Pick up our story back here. Okay, we get back over here, and it says in verse 5 here, and while he yet was speaking, that is, while Peter was talking, now when you put them all together, the conversation between Jesus and these 2 men had come to a conclusion. There was evidently some silence. You ever seen anybody had to talk when there was silence? Had to say something. That's Peter. And so he brought this out. Now while he was yet speaking, so while Peter was talking, which wouldn't take him very long to say this, while he was yet speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Now this was not just a dark cloud, but remember, Jesus was there shining, his face shining, his clothing shining. It was glistening. And now then, this bright, shining, lighted cloud comes in, and here's this voice saying, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. You hear him. Now, when they looked up, they were shocked. Look what it says. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. So that voice just knocked them to the ground. It just knocked them to the ground. And Jesus came and touched them and said, arise and be not afraid. And lifting up their eyes, they saw no one save Jesus only. So here it is. They were petrified. They fell on their face. You remember what Paul did when he looked up and he saw that shining light on the road to Damascus? He fell, knocked him down, just fell. So overwhelming that your physical body and your mental condition cannot take it when you come into contact with such spiritual beings. It just fall down. And so that's what they did. Well, then when they stood up, they looked, the voice was there, you hear him, and cloud is gone. Now, have they learned a major lesson here? They have seen something that they've learned something from, and they've heard something that they've heard something from. Now, I don't know whether they heard Jesus talking about his death to the extent that they learned anything from that or not. I don't know that. It doesn't say that. It says that they were there talking. But the impression that was made on them when they saw Jesus' form change, and then dazzling white, and they saw all of this, and they heard that voice, was so overwhelming. Peter is going to use that later on in his preaching. And then they've learned something from the teachings of God when God says, "This is my beloved Son. You hear him." And when they looked up, Jesus is the only one who said it. Would that impress you that you're to listen to him, not Moses? You're to listen to him and not Elijah, who was one of the great prophets. And so Jesus now is being exalted. It's being exalted. What's the purpose for this 3 years? What is Jesus trying to do? What is this 3-year life on earth for? Why did all of these things happen? Why are they written down? They're written down so we might believe that Jesus is the Christ. So this is a process of where God is showing these men, as well as the world, this man is my son. And so he takes him up, and he has this marvelous experience that is involved up there. Now, later on, it would probably be, well, this would happen in about 33 A.D. Peter, I think, died somewhere down around 68, 69 A.D. So 35 years later. Peter is getting ready to die. Let's turn over to 2 Peter. And when Peter is getting ready to die, he's going to bring this up. He's going to use it for the brethren so that they can see a lesson. Let's look at what Peter said in 2 Peter 1, and we're going to start reading in verse 12. We'll point out just a few things here. Peter said, "Wherefore I shall be ready always to put you in remembrance of these things, though you know them and are established in the truth which is in you." So now he said, I'm talking to people that I know are established Christians. I know that you understand the truth. I'm not talking to babes in Christ. And I think it right, as long as I am in this tabernacle, there he's talking about his body, the place where he's living, to stir you up by putting you in remembrance, knowing that the putting off of my tabernacle cometh swiftly, even as our Lord Jesus Christ signified unto me. So now, Peter says, I think it's proper, even though you people are established Christians, to put you in remembrance, because I'm getting ready to depart this life. I don't have much longer to live. I'm going to depart it as Jesus prophesied and told me I would. You can read about that prophecy in the last paragraph of the Gospel of John, where Jesus there talks about it, that Peter is going to die a horrible death in behalf of him, that he tells people. Now then, in verse 15, he said, Yea, I will give diligence, that at every time you may be able after my decease to call these things to remembrance. So the last years of Peter's preaching, he was trying to preach in such a way so that after he died, these things would be instilled within the mind of that generation, so that they would constantly bring them to memory about his teaching and what he was preaching. Now, here's what he says. Here's why he says it's so important. I don't want you to get deceived. I want you to remember what I've been telling you. He said, for we did not follow cunningly devised fables or myths when we made known unto you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For he received from God the Father honor and glory, when there was born such a voice to him by the majestic glory, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And this voice we ourselves heard borne out of heaven when we were with him in the holy mountain. Peter's never forgot it, has he? And he's saying, I want you to know there's no fables, there's no myths in the things that I'm preaching. There's no cunningly devised situations there in these things that I'm preaching, because I'm an eyewitness. I saw this happen. I heard God give him the glory with his own voice up on that mountain. And then he says, and we have the word of prophecy made more sure. Now, Peter says, as a result of what I have seen, witnessed, all of this, we have the word of prophecy even made more sure. Let's think about that for just a moment. As you begin to talk about the prophets, if you go back and you begin to read all the prophecies that God said, telling about Jesus Christ. So you get back here, and you start out with all these prophecies, which begins back in the book of Genesis, and comes down, and your first major one was with Abraham. Then you start, and every major person prophesied about Jesus Christ and his kingdom. You come on down, the ones we're familiar with mainly is Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so forth. They were telling about how he would be born, where he would be born, how he would live, how he would die, where he would be buried, how he would raise from the dead. They were telling all of these things. There are over 300 prophecies about Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ had to come from a certain tribe. He had to be born in a certain little city. He had to have been born of a certain kind of parents. And on and on and on and on. What are the chances for any man to accidentally fulfill these 300 prophecies? People have tried to calculate it, and it comes out that they say there's no number that you can put to it. It just comes out so far out that there's not a chance of anybody accidentally fulfilling all of those prophecies. Someday maybe we'll go through them, maybe start pointing out and get to looking at certain things that is in there. For instance, you had to be a Jew, but what tribe did you have to come from? You had to come from Judah, because he's going to be a king. All right, so that eliminates the other 11 tribes. And then out of the tribe of Judah, he had to come from what family? David. Now that eliminates all the other families in Judah except this one little stem. And then you take this one little stem and you bring it down, and now then he has to be born of a virgin. How many is that going to eliminate? And then he has to be born in a little small town of Bethlehem. Not Jerusalem, not some major town, but in a little small town of Bethlehem. Now that's kind of talking about being born over here at Maltby. Now there are kids born over here at Maltby, but how many kids are born at Maltby? If you were going to start making up a prophecy about somebody who was going to be president of the United States in 800 years from now, and they were going to do great things for America, and then you started out and you start telling about that they had to be of a certain family, and they had to be born in Maltby, and they had to do this, and they had to do that. How many is that going to eliminate? And they have to be 20 have to be come from poor parents. And by the way, he's not going to be called a Bethlehemite. He's going to be called a what? A Nazarene. This boy's going to live in Nazareth. He's going to be born in a little town way down at the other end of the country, just a little town. But he's going to live in just a little town in the north end of the country. Now, they told all about these things hundreds of years before he was ever born. What's the chances? Well, you look at it, you say, mind-boggling. Nobody could do that. And this is Peter's point. Peter's point is, here he came, and he fulfilled all the prophecies, which is just absolutely phenomenal and mathematically impossible to do. And Peter says, but now we have the word of prophecy even made more sure. So how can it be made more sure than what we've been talking about? Peter says it's made more sure because one day we were called up with him on the mountain. He was transfigured. He was glorified. He was changed. He talked to those two men who had raised from the dead that had come back to converse with him. And then there was a cloud came, and out of that cloud came that voice from heaven. This is my beloved Son. How more clearly did God point out, this is the one? You see? This is the one. It might be like if we were trying to pick out songbooks, and there's one songbook that if you have, you get there's $1 million check in it. And you look at it and you say, well, here and here and here. Well, I start telling you, okay, I give you some things about it, and you might weed some things out. But what could be more sure than if I come down and I say, look, this is my beloved songbook. This is where it is. Anybody got an idea where it is? See, that's what God did to Jesus. And so Peter is saying, wherefore you give the more earnest heed. So you listen now to the things that they had to say. So he said, before I die, that's my job. I'm trying to put you in remembrance of these so you'll never forget them after I die and never depart from these teachings. Okay, so we come down from the Mount of Transfiguration. Now then, they're walking down the mountain. And as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, tell the vision to no man, until the Son of Man be risen from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, why then say the scribes that Elijah must come first? Wonder why they brought up the name of Elijah here at this particular time. Who was up there? Up there is Moses and Elijah. Now, what is it that Malachi had prophesied? You remember we spent a lot of time on that? When Malachi closed out the Old Testament, what was it he said? What is it you're to look for? You're to look for who? Who was it to come? Elijah. Elijah is coming and restoring all things. Now, we've already had Jesus. He's talked to them back in chapter 11. And he's told them about John the Baptist, how great John the Baptist was, and so forth. But now then, Jesus is going to tell them, as they're thinking, and I suppose they're probably thinking, there's Elijah. And what is it they're going to be looking for? They're going to be looking for Elijah, aren't they? See, there. Before the Christ comes. That's another thing that you and I really can't understand, because that was instilled in their mind that they were looking for Elijah. They were looking for Elijah. Here comes Christ, here comes Jesus, and he said, I'm the one. But according to the Old Testament prophecy, who is to come before he comes? Elijah. Wonder what I'm missing. What am I missing in here? So now then they ask him. I would expect they might have thought, Elijah's here, now maybe something is going to happen. See? something's going to happen and all this. So they said, what about that? And he answered and said, Elijah indeed cometh, and he shall restore all things. But I say unto you that Elijah is come already, and they knew him not, but did unto him whatsoever they would. Even so shall the Son of Man also suffer of them. Then understood the disciples that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. So Jesus explained it to them in such a way that Elijah has already come. They took Elijah and did to him whatever they wanted to do. They ended up killing him. The rulers ended up killing him. Now the same group of people that hated John the Baptist is also going to take me and make me suffer. They're also going to kill me. So he prophesies then about his death again at this time. Let's flip over to Mark 9. I think there's some thing here about these guys. Over here, as they're coming back down from the mountain here, let's see. In verse 9, as they were coming down from the mountain, he charged them that they should tell no man what things they had seen. And when the Son of Man, when the Son of Man should have risen again from the dead. And they kept the saying, questioning among themselves what the raising again from the dead should mean. So they kept the saying, but they said, what's he talking about? Has he ever talked about this before? Being killed and then being raised? What was it Peter did to him the first time he brought the subject up? Rebuked him. But now then he's laying it out before them again in here and getting them to think about this. Okay, I'm going to flip over to Luke, the 9th chapter. Over here, I think it gives us just a wee bit more of a story in here. In verse 37, I guess. And they came down the next day, and they were come down from the mountain, and no. Where is it here? It talks about, it's in here where he told them about raising from the dead, who appeared to glory. Now Peter and 12 were with him. Maybe it's not. I don't guess it is in Luke. What's that? In verse 21. No, that's not the one I'm after. That's the one that he talked about before. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. But skip down to 44 is where it is here. But this is just a little bit after this. But since he's talking about being raised from the dead. And while they were marveling at all the things which he said unto his disciples, let these words sink into your ears. In other words, put these words into your ears. For the Son of Man shall be delivered up into the hands of men. But they understood not what this saying. And it was concealed from them that they should not perceive it, and they were afraid to ask him about this saying. So they don't understand it. And they're afraid to ask him what it might mean. He's been rebuking them a little bit, and he'll rebuke them just, and you'll see right before this rebuking them, and so that's, I guess, the reason that they were afraid. But now as we go back to the 17th chapter, he's telling them about the raising from the dead here. Now, let's look in verse 14. And when they were come to the multitude, now they come down out of that mountain, and the multitude is down there waiting, and how many of his disciples would be down there? The apostles. 9 of them are going to be down there. Okay. There came to him a man kneeling to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic. That word, epileptic, is kind of interesting. The Greek word is moonstruck. That's what the word means, moonstruck. And that's that's used in our country and it's used over there and all of this. It was a name that's given to a disease that seems to come and go. And a lot of times people attributed things to the phases of the moon and so forth. And so this mental disease, they attributing to that in here. But he'll go ahead and he'll define some other things. And he's going to say, he doesn't think it's moonstruck. Jesus doesn't. He's going to talk about demons. It's demons. But that's what the word right there actually says. It said, okay, he's epileptic, and he suffereth grievously. For oftentimes he falleth into the fire, and oftentimes into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. And Jesus answered and said, he turns to his disciples, O faithful and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him hither to me. And Jesus rebuked him, and the demon went out from him, and the boy was cured from that hour. Now, Mark and Luke says, as he was bringing him, he went to get the boy, as he was bringing him over to Jesus, this demon struck him, knocked him to the ground, made him roll. Jesus then rebuked him while he was there on the ground, rebuked the demon, come out of him, and the demon came out, and the boy then just laid there as though he was dead. No movement whatsoever. And people said, he's dead. And Jesus walked over, took his hand, picked him up, and he was cured. Never had it happen again. All right? So he cured that, cast out that demon. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart, that is after they went back home now, and said, why could not we cast it out? Which shows that Jesus has given them the power, and we've read about it one time before, when he sent them out on what's called that limited commission, and he gave them the power to cast out demons. So here it is, why couldn't we cast it out? And he saith unto them, because of your little faith. For verily I say unto you, if you have the faith of a grain of mustard seed, that is just a little bit. If you just had a little bit of faith. You guys have been with me so long, and you don't even have enough faith. If you just had a little faith, you could have done this in here. So he says, you had the faith of a grain of mustard seed. You say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place. Again, in the Greek it says, go over there. You'll say to this mountain, go over there. And it'll go over there, is what he says. A lot of times the reason I'm pointing out some of these things is in our English translations, they translate it correctly, where it is here, remove hence to yonder place. It says exactly the same thing as go over there, except this is more poetical, more flowery. A lot of times we have some flowery language, poetical, and we don't take it as seriously as we do if it's just straightforward language like that. But go over there. And he says, and it shall be removed, or it'll go over there, and nothing shall be impossible for you. If you've got that faith that you should have. Now let's stop and think just for a moment here. Jesus takes 3 men up. What's happened to them up on the mountain? What effect has it had on them? I can't say. It doesn't tell us, but it had a profound effect, as we can see later on, Peter using it this way. You come back down and here are the 9, and the 9 now couldn't even cast out this demon because of their little faith. In other words, my question is Jesus having any disciple problems? Having any disciple problems? So oftentimes, we pick up the story, we think he picked out 12 guys, they followed him, there was no problems, everything went smooth. But no, he has these men, and in fact, right now, Jesus has a problem with these guys because he's just getting ready to talk now about his dying here again. He has a problem; they can't even conceive of that, and he's trying to prepare them. Now, the reason he's trying to prepare them is he's getting ready to leave to go to Jerusalem, and this will be the trip that he's going to die on. So they're getting ready to leave. Now then, it says in verse 23, and, by the way, let's come back up here. And this is often said here, if you have faith in the grain of mustard seed, you say remove the mountain. And people read that as though if we have the faith of a grain of mustard seed, we can remove a mountain. Is that what Jesus is saying here? To whom is he talking? He's talking to people that have been given the miraculous power, you see, to cast out these demons, do these miracles. He's not talking about everyday Christians out here. He's talking about people who have been told, you can do this. I'm the Son of God. I'm giving you the power. You can do it. And they didn't have the faith to go ahead and do it. 22. And while they abode in Galilee, Jesus said unto them, the Son of Man shall be delivered up into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And the third day he shall be raised up. And they were exceeding sorry. So he's bringing up the subject. He's letting them know. I want you to understand we're going to Jerusalem. I want you to understand I'm going to be killed. And I want you to understand I'll be raised from the dead. Now, they were sorry. They were frustrated. They didn't know what to do. They were scared to ask Jesus. They had been rebuked because of their little faith. What's he talking about? Now, to you and me, it's so simple. He was talking about he's going to be killed and raised from the dead. You say, how many times do you have to say that? He's going to be killed and raised from the dead. He's going to be killed and raised from the dead. He's going to be killed and raised from the dead. How many times have you ever seen anybody killed and raised from the dead? So when somebody says that's going to happen to them, what do you think? You go to work tomorrow and somebody comes in and says, boy, I had an experience yesterday. I was raised from the dead yesterday. Do you take that literally, or do you think that there might be a figurative meaning behind that thing? See, what happened to you? See? Oh man, I was in so much debt. My aunt died and left me a great big wad of money, and I got it. I've been born again. I'm raised from the dead. I'm a new creature. And so they start talking about that. I suppose that's what these guys were wondering. What in the world's going on? But they don't know. Now, even when they go out to the garden and the Roman government comes out to get to get Jesus, is Peter about to give him up? And then, after he dies, they surely have faith to go back and say, no problem. He'll raise from the dead on the third day. Won't they? It'll be interesting when we get there and see what they do. Okay, he's preparing them for this. And I want us to see he has a lot of educational problem to do with these men. But now, always keep this in mind. These people that couldn't comprehend this, these people that had such little faith, these people that did these things, these are the people that brought the gospel of Jesus Christ to us and never made a mistake when they delivered it to us. These are the men that were all willing to die for what they were preaching because they knew it was the truth. Okay, yeah. Okay, why wouldn't they question? Why were they afraid? I think it's because they just got through being rebuked back here. Why couldn't we do that? How long do I have to be with you, Denise? How long am I going to have to put up with you? It's because of your little faith. Now, have I got any other questions? Well, they might not. I'm just giving my opinion, but I'm just saying there's a good reason, you see, that is in there. Yeah, any more questions? No more questions. Close class. No, okay. Yeah. Oh, we got one more. Okay. No. This man came and said he is moonstruck. This was a terminology that they used to describe people with mental diseases. Do you know what our English word today is for that? Lunatic. So actually it came, if you want to get just a literal translation, my son is a lunatic. and he falls in the fire, and he does this, and he does that. See, is what it's saying. So the word epilepsy is not in there. Today, we've given the name epilepsy to a problem that causes people to do this. So he's got this problem, and then it's identified, not as epilepsy, but it's identified as a demon. So Jesus said it's a demon. I couldn't answer that. I don't know. I never studied that. But here it's the father that diagnosed it and said he's lunatic, and Jesus is the one that says it's a demon. He cast him out. Uh-huh. Well, about the only thing I know is what I've said. I think it's what the truth is on here. And yeah, that's what actually